Far from the tumult of Terra, beyond the great warp storms that shroud the Imperium's fragile borders, lies a realm shaped by discipline, honor, and the unyielding will of a single shining legion. It is here, in the heart of Ultramar, that their story begins. The tale of the Ultramarines, the 13th Legion of the Adeptus Astartes, whose resolve has preserved humanity in ages when hope seemed lost. Their worlds glitter beneath distant suns, order imposed upon chaos with a precision that echoes the mind of their primarch, Robert Guilliman. Yet even here, in this bastion of stability, shadows stir, and ancient memories whisper through the silent corridors of the past. The night cycle had settled over Makridge's polar fortress, its metal bastions glowing faintly beneath the firmament. Snow fell in slow, swirling flurries, each flake catching the pale light of the defense turrets. Within the fortress, all was quiet, save for the low hum of reactors and the distant tramp of boots as sentries patrolled their stations with disciplined rhythm. This was a place built to withstand the fury of invaders and the ravages of time. Its walls had seen sieges, demonic incursions, and the savage tide of the Tyranids. Yet tonight, it rested in silence, at peace for the moment, in the Hall of Triumphs. The statues of fallen heroes cast long shadows. Columns of gleaming ceramite held up a ceiling carved with scenes of the Legion's victories, the pacification of Thoas, the Battle of Kolth before it burned, the triumphs won in the early days when Guilliman led his sons across the stars. The air was cold, still, and heavy with the gravity of memory. At the center of the hall stood Brother Sergeant Elion of the 4th Company. Though he appeared motionless, he was deep in contemplation. The fires of battle that burned within his transhuman heart had calmed for the first time in many months, replaced now with reflection. He had returned only hours before from the frontier world of Ennead Primus, where orc warbands had threatened to overwhelm the defenses. The campaign had been brutal but victorious, and the chapter had granted those who fought there a brief respite. Elion's armor, still bearing the scuffs and minor scars of the campaign, glimmered in the hall's dim light. He ran a gauntlet hand gently across the engraved names of the fallen, brothers whose memories would forever be etched into the chapter's history. Each name was a reminder that glory demanded sacrifice, and that even the finest warriors of the Imperium were not immune to death. Makridge was serene in these hours, but Elion felt a restlessness stirring within him. He wondered if Guilliman himself, now awakened and guiding the Imperium in its darkest era, ever found such rare moments of reflection. Or did the weight of the Imperium's survival permit him no peace? Elion imagined him standing in the Strategium, surrounded by holographic maps of war zones, always planning, always preparing. The sergeant turned as he sensed footsteps approaching. From the shadows emerged Brother Lycos, his helm mag-clamped at his belt, his expression solemn but warm with familiarity. Lycos had been part of Elion's squad for decades, and the two had forged a bond deeper than steel. "You are lost in thought, brother," Lycos said, his voice steady. "As are you," Elion replied. "You tread softly tonight. It is quiet. Too quiet for those accustomed to war." Elion nodded. "The silence is a blessing, yet it feels foreign." Lycos joined him in gazing at the statues. "We fight so that others may know peace, yet we rarely feel at home within it." They remained still for a long moment. The flickering glow of lumen strips reflected off the polished statues, illuminating faces of warriors long dead. Heroes who had stood at Guilliman's side during the Great Crusade. Men who had fought their own brothers during the tragic days of the Horus Heresy. The Ultramarines had endured betrayal, destruction, and the ruination of their worlds, but they had risen again, stronger than before. "Tomorrow," Lycos said quietly, "the chapter master will address the returning companies. Word spreads that he brings new orders." Elion's brow furrowed. "New orders? Already? The galaxy is at war on all fronts. We are fortunate to have had even a moment of respite." Elion exhaled slowly. "Then let us treasure this night." They walked together along the hall's length, their footsteps echoing softly. Outside, wind howled gently past the frozen walls, the sound faint but constant. It carried with it the sense of a world that never slept, a fortress that remained vigilant even in peace. As they reached the end of the hall, the vast doors opened with a low, hydraulic sigh. The cold air rolled in, carrying the scent of frost and machine oil. Beyond lay the courtyard of the fortress, illuminated by tall, blue-lit spires. Thunderhawk gunships rested on their landing pads like slumbering beasts, their wings folded, their engines dark. Above, the night sky stretched endlessly, a field of stars glimmering against the void. One could almost believe it serene, if one did not know the horrors hidden among those distant points of light. Elion stepped out into the crisp air. The cold did not bother him. His enhanced physiology rendered such discomforts trivial. But he welcomed the sensation nonetheless. It grounded him, reminded him of the realities beyond battle. "Lycos," he said softly, "do you ever wonder what Ultramar would be like without war?" His battle brother regarded him thoughtfully. "A world without war is a dream fit for poets or children. We were not created for such visions." "Perhaps," Elion replied, "but I wonder if Guilliman once imagined it, when he built Ultramar into a beacon." Lycos looked up at the stars. Even a beacon cast shadows. The two stood in silence. The fortress hummed around them, a living monument to duty. Somewhere in the distance, the bells marking the night cycle told softly that a calmness settled over Elion, rare and fleeting. He let it linger. The galaxy would call soon enough. The enemies of mankind never slept, and the Ultramarines were bound by oath and blood to confront them. But tonight, in the heart of Ultramar, surrounded by honor and memory, he allowed himself the luxury of peace that it felt like standing at the edge of a dream. Tomorrow, war would find them again. Tonight, they rested beneath the watchful stars. The dawn cycle crept slowly across Makridge's polar fortress, its pale light casting long beams through the high-arched windows. The snowfall had ceased, leaving the world outside washed clean and silent. But within the fortress, a steady hum of awakening activity had begun. Servitors clattered along the corridors with mechanical precision. Cherub drones fluttered through the air like strange, metallic birds. Deep within the armories, Tech Marines chanted Benheric liturgies as they inspected bolters, chainswords, and the revered relics of the chapter. Brother Sergeant Elion stood in the reclusium, the chapel's vast chamber illuminated by flickering ghostlight candles and towering holographic displays of ancient oaths. The space was both sacred and solemn, its silence broken only by the soft chanting of other Ultramarines in quiet devotion. His armor had been repaired and polished by the armorers, every edge restored to the crisp lines that befit a warrior of Ultramar. The blue ceramite reflected the light like still water. The white Omega symbol on his pauldron gleamed, and fresh purity seals fluttered gently with each motion he made. Elion lowered himself onto one knee before the great statue of Guilliman, carved from stone so old and heavy it seemed to anchor the very room. The Primarch stood in regal pose, sword raised, eyes fixed on some distant horizon. Even carved from stone, Guilliman's presence commanded obedience and reverence. "Guide me," Elion whispered, "as you guided those before me." He felt no supernatural response, none was expected. But he felt steadier, the calm certainty that had sustained his legion for 10 millennia, settling once more into his soul. Footsteps approached behind him, deliberate, measured, unmistakably power-armored. He rose slowly, turning to find Chaplain Veritas watching him. The chaplain's black armor absorbed the light like a void, contrasting sharply with the bone-white skull helm that marked him as the spiritual guardian of the company. His Crozius Arcanum, its winged icon gleaming, rested in one gauntlet hand. "Elion," Veritas said, voice resonant and grave. "The time for contemplation is brief this day. The chapter master will speak soon." Elion bowed his head. "I am ready, Chaplain." Veritas studied him for a long moment. Though the chaplain's skull helm made expression unreadable, Elion could sense approval in the tone of his words. "Your squad fought with exceptional valor at Ennead Primus. The records speak highly of your leadership." "It was the will of the Emperor," Elion replied. "Humility," Veritas said, "is a virtue seldom found in warriors. Guard it well, Brother Sergeant." The two left the reclusium together, their boots echoing against the stone floors as they made their way through the fortress. Other Ultramarines joined them in the halls, some from the 4th Company like Elion, others from the 2nd, 7th, or Reserve Companies. Many wore new scars on their armor, reminders of the frontier battles from which they'd just returned. All walked with the same resolute purpose. As they approached the Strategium Amphitheater, the murmur of gathered warriors reached them. Hundreds of Ultramarines stood assembled in perfect formation, the air thick with quiet discipline. Banners hung from the walls, each depicting a world of Ultramar or a historic triumph of the XIII Legion. At the far end of the room, raised upon a podium, stood Chapter Master Marnius Calgar. Clad in his ancient armor of Heracles, Calgar appeared as imposing as any living son of Guilliman could. The massive ceramite plates, adorned with golden trim and the sigils of Ultramar, were a testament to centuries of service. His gauntlets, those legendary power fists that had crushed Tyrannid Chitin and Demon Bone alike, rested calmly at his sides. His expression was stern, but not harsh. When he spoke, his voice carried effortlessly across the amphitheater. "Brothers of Ultramar," Calgar began, "we stand today not merely as warriors returned from victory, but as guardians preparing for trials yet to come." A hush fell across the hall. Elion felt the weight of those words like a tightening fist. "The Imperium is beset on all fronts," Calgar continued. "The Indomitus Crusade has secured vital routes and reclaimed lost worlds, yet the darkness grows. Warp storms swell. Tyrannid splinter fleets converge. Orc warlords gather strength. The forces of chaos, always they strike where vigilance falters." Elion glanced subtly around him. None wavered. The Ultramarines were statues of resolve, but, Calgar said, his voice rising, "we do not falter." Hollow displays flared to life above the podium, projecting star charts and shifting symbols. One system blinked brighter than the rest, the Hadron Belt, that a chain of remote mining worlds near the edge of Ultima Segmentum. "The Hadron Belt has gone silent," Calgar said. "No astropathic messages. No shipping traffic. No reports. The last transmission received spoke of unknown hostiles approaching the outer colonies." Unknown hostiles. Elion felt a familiar stirring in his chest, part dread, part anticipation. Calgar's gaze swept across the assembled warriors. Strike forces are being assembled from multiple companies. The 4th Company will deploy under Captain Akran. Brother Sergeant Elion, your squad will serve at the forefront of reconnaissance operations. Elion felt a surge of purpose. He placed a fist to his chest in salute. "It will be done," he murmured. Calgar raised a hand, signaling the gathering's conclusion. "Rearm. Prepare your war gear. Within the next cycle, we depart. Remember our duty, brothers. Remember who we are." As the warriors responded as one, "For Guilliman and the Emperor." The sound shook the very air. The amphitheater emptied in orderly ranks. Elion rejoined Lycos at the exit, the two falling into step without a word. Only when they turned toward the armory did Lycos speak. "Unknown hostiles," he said quietly. "Do you think it is the Orc warbands again?" Elion shook his head. "Orcs do not silence entire systems. This feels different." Lycos didn't argue. They both felt it, the unease that comes before a storm, the whisper of something just beyond understanding. Elion looked toward the distant hangars where Thunderhawks waited, their machine spirits slumbering but eager to awaken. "We will know soon enough," he said softly. And as the fortress thrummed with preparations for war, the calm night they had enjoyed felt like the memory of a dream fading into the light of an unforgiving dawn. The armory of Macridge's polar fortress was a cathedral of steel and sanctity. Its vaulted ceilings rose high above rows of weapon racks, each holding relics of war older than the Imperium's darkest scars. Servo arms moved with mechanical grace, adjusting vambraces, swapping out worn plates, and lowering heavy weapons onto reinforced workbenches. The scent of sacred oils hung thick in the air, mingling with ozone from energized power fields and the faint tang of weld metal. Brother Sergeant Elion stepped within, helm tucked under his arm, feeling the familiar shift of solemnity that always washed over him in this place. Here, War was not an abstraction, it was an inevitability. Each bolter, each blade, each suit of Mark X plate represented the unending vigilance of the 13 Legion. Techmarine Malthur approached them, his red armor contrasting sharply with the blue of the chapter. Servo arms extended from his backpack like metallic wings, each tipped with tools that whirred softly as he worked. His left eye glowed with augmetic light, its crimson lens analyzing every micron of armor he surveyed. "Elion," Malthur said, voice modulated and metallic. "Your armor has been fully restored. Structural integrity is at 99.8%. The machine spirit is satisfied." "I thank you, Techmarine," Elion replied. "The spirit thanks you, Sergeant," Malthur corrected. "It remembers the battles you have endured together." Elion ran a hand across his breastplate. "And it shall endure more." "Indeed," Malthur said. "Darkness gathers in the void. Your warplate stirs with anticipation." Beside Elion, Brother Lycos received his armaments, his 2-foot-long combat blade glinting under the lumen strips, its edge honed to monomolecular sharpness. Lycos tested the balance, nodding with approval. "Sharp enough to carve through ceramite," he muttered. "Let us hope you do not need to," Elion said. Lycos grinned faintly. "Hope is for civilians." Malthur interrupted with a sharp, mechanical click of his servo arms. "There is more you must see," the Techmarines said, leading them deeper into the armory. They passed ancient suits of armor encased in stasis fields, relics from the Great Crusade, and racks of heavy weapons that glowed faintly with dormant power. Many bore the marks of venerable service, scars from bolter fire, slashes from Xeno's claws, even the charred pitting left behind by long-vanquished demons. Malthur gestured toward a sealed alcove. The door hissed open, revealing a new set of equipment. "For the Hadron Belt deployment," he said, "the 4th Company will field a new pattern of Auspex scanners and reconnaissance gear. These systems are optimized for low-signal environments and void anomalies." "Void anomalies?" Elion exchanged a glance with Lycos. "What does that imply?" Lycos asked. "That," Malthur replied, "is for the captain to explain. I am but the caretaker of your means of war." The Techmarine lifted a compact device, sleek, reinforced, humming with low power. Elion accepted it carefully. "The Hadron Belt is not known for anomalies." "Not until now," Malthur said. Before Elion could ask more, the fortress-wide vox chimed, its deep tone echoing through the armory. A crisp voice followed. "All squads of the 4th Company, report to Hangar Bay Primus. Pre-deployment briefing to commence immediately." Elion placed his helm onto his head. It sealed with an airtight click, the world shifting into crisp clarity through the suit's advanced sensor suite. "Duty calls," Lycos said. "Always," Elion replied. They strode from the armory, joined by other warriors whose footsteps formed a steady, unified cadence. As they neared the hangars, the sound of engines warming reverberated through the metal corridors. Thunderhawks activated their systems, their red warning lights strobing across the walls, casting reflections on polished ceramite. The bay was alive with activity. Servitors loaded ammunition crates into gunships, while Techmarines blessed each machine with ritual oils. The scent of hot metal and sacred incense filled the air. Captain Akran stood on the raised command dais overlooking the hangar. He was a giant even among his transhuman brethren, broad-shouldered, steady, his armor a deep cobalt trimmed with gold. His helm rested at his hip, and his eyes, sharp and cold as a winter sea, swept across the arriving squads. "Brothers," he began, his voice a measured baritone, "assemble." The Ultramarines formed into perfect ranks. Elion's squad stood at the front of the reconnaissance detachment, each warrior poised like a statue carved from living steel. Akran activated a hollow projector. A three-dimensional map of the Hadron Belt shimmered into existence, a chain of 7 worlds orbiting a dying star. Atmospheric data flickered, accompanied by notes of mineral yields, population metrics, and supply chains. 3 weeks ago, Akran said, Hadron 4 reported unknown vessels entering the system. The message was incomplete, fragmented by interference. Since then, all contact has been lost. Akran zoomed in on a world near the outer edge, Hadron VII. This planet was an automated mining station. No inhabitants. Yet its orbit stabilizers have shut down. The world is drifting. Drifting. Lycos muttered under his breath that a world without pilots did not drift unless someone, or something, tampered with it. Akran continued, astropathic communication attempts have failed. Probes sent into the belt vanish from our Auspex nets. Something is disrupting signals and machine spirits alike. Xenos? One Marine asked. Perhaps, Akran said. But the nature of the interference does not match Orc signatures, nor Tyranid synapse disruption. And chaos corruption leaves unmistakable traces. These anomalies do not align with known threats. A cold tightening formed in Elion's chest. Unknown foes were the most dangerous. Your role, Akran said, his gaze turning to Elion's squad, is to make first contact. Lycos straightened, as did the others. You will deploy to Hadron VII, investigate the mining outpost, and identify the source of the disruption. Expect hostiles. Expect the unknown. Elion felt the weight of command settle onto him. We will not fail, Captain. Akran nodded once. I do not expect you to. He raised his voice so the entire company could hear. Prepare for launch. Thunderhawks roared. Engines powering to full.as, Elion led his squad up the boarding ramp. He felt the familiar shift from quiet contemplation to the controlled storm of war. The interior of the craft hummed with life. Restraint harnesses locked into place. Status lights flickered green across the console. Lycos leaned close. The unknown, he said. I prefer enemies with names. Elion secured his harness. Then let us learn theirs. The Thunderhawk lifted, engines thundering as it rose into the morning sky. The fortress shrank beneath them. Ultramar receded into a tapestry of blue and white. Ahead lay darkness. Ahead lay the Hadron Belt, and whatever waited for them within its silent shroud. The Thunderhawk gunship Invictus Talon cut through the upper atmosphere of Macridge like a spear thrown by a god, its engines burning bright as it pierced the veil of Ultramar's sky. Inside, the vibrations of ascent hummed through ceramite plating and into the bones of the warriors seated within. Brother Sergeant Elion felt the tremors settle into a familiar rhythm, comforting, in a way. The rhythm of departure. The rhythm of war. Strapped into their grav harnesses, the members of his squad sat in disciplined silence. Brother Lycos, Brother Tyron, Brothers Gaius, Pelion, and Atrax. Each of them had fought through countless frontier wars. Each had faced threats that would break mortal men. Yet now, as the gunship angled upward toward the void, Elion sensed the same tension in all of them. A quiet anticipation sharpened by the unknown that a vox chime sounded within the cabin. This is the flight commander, came the pilot's voice, distorted slightly by the internal comms. We have cleared Macridge's atmosphere. Preparing for warp translation. Estimated jump in 5 minutes. Acknowledged. Elion replied through the squad channel. He rose slightly as the grav harness unlocked with a hiss, then braced himself against the bulkhead. One by one, his warriors followed suit, performing final checks of their gear. Bolters were inspected, ammo feeds rechecked, Auspex scanners calibrated, ritual prayers spoken beneath their breaths. Lycos approached him, helm tucked under one arm, his expression thoughtful. Sergeant, he said quietly. Do you sense it? Elion turned slightly. Sense what? Oh, wait. Lycos glanced toward the sealed void gate at the front of the cabin, as though something watches us. Something far away. Elion paused before responding. The unknown can breed such impressions. The Hadron Belt may hold nothing more than a malfunction or a new breed of Xenos. Do not let shadows make ghosts of themselves. Lycos gave a small nod, but Elion could see the unease lingering behind his eyes. Before Lycos could speak further, the pilot's voice returned. All hands, prepare for warp. The interior lights shifted to deep crimson. Warning runes flickered across the bulkheads. A low growl, like the rumble of distant thunder, vibrated through the ship's frame as warp engines spooled to full readiness. The Invictus Talon shuddered violently. Elion gripped the harness rails. Brace yourselves. A moment later, reality tore open like a wound. The warp enveloped them. For a single breath, everything was silent. Then the world exploded into sensation. Colors that did not exist in the material realm flickered beyond the viewports. Shifting shapes that twisted like serpents of light. Echoes, not of sound but of thought, pressed faintly at the edges of consciousness. Warp transit was never comfortable, never natural, but the Geller field held strong, its golden glow visible as a faint shimmer over the interior surfaces. Even so, something felt different that a ripple coursed through the gunship. Sharp, sudden, unnatural. What was that? Lycos asked, gripping a handrail. Tyron checked a console. Anomalous fluctuation in the Geller field. Brief, now stable. Warp storms. Pelion asked. The pilot's voice came through again, strained. Negative. The storm lanes are clear. But something just brushed us. Elion stiffened. Explain. I can't, the pilot admitted. It wasn't psychic. It wasn't a tear. It was something else. The warp pressed harder against the hull, like a great unseen hand dragging across it. The ship groaned. Runes flashed. Then, as abruptly as it began, the pressure vanished. The warp peeled away in a tidal rush. The Thunderhawk burst back into real space with a roar. The sudden stillness felt shocking. We've arrived, the pilot said, disbelieving. Brothers, behold the Hadron Belt. The viewports brightened, revealing a dying star burning weakly at the system's heart. Its light was dim, sickly, more ash than flame. Around it spun the 7 worlds of the belt, each a dark sphere lit only by faint industrial glows or the dead shimmer of inactive orbital platforms. Elion felt something in his chest tighten. Squad, he said, voice low but steady. Prepare for descent. The Thunderhawk banked hard, engines flaring as it angled toward the outermost world. Hadron VII, the world grew larger in the viewport. A barren, dust-shrouded mining planet with sprawling automated facilities that now lay dim and lifeless. The mining outpost was situated near a cluster of black metal spires. Refinery towers that had once belched smoke and steam, but now stood silent as tombstones to NO lights, NO Vox-beacons, NO machine activity. Nothing. This should not be possible, Gaius murmured. His helm's optics zoomed in on the main facility. There should be at least minimal drone operation, even in power-down cycles. Elion observed quietly. This world is dead. No, Lycos said. It was killed. The Thunderhawk descended lower. Static crackled across the comms. Then more static. Then silence. Pilot, Elion said. Status? No response. Atrax muttered. Comms are dead. Elion tried his own internal vox. Captain Akran, this is Elion. Respond. Nothing. System-wide interference, Tyron reported. Auspex functionality reduced. Vox range limited to short distance only. Unknown hostiles, Lycos whispered. We're blind. The Thunderhawk's landing gear extended. The craft touched down with a heavy thud on the dusty landing pad outside the main mining facility. Brothers, Elion said, rising as the boarding ramp began to descend. Form up. Weapons hot. The ramp hissed open, a gust of frigid air rolling inside. The outpost lay before them, silent, empty, lifeless. The wind carried dust across metallic ground. Stray cables hung from the walls like torn sinew. Machinery that should have hummed with life was frozen, its cogitators dark and unresponsive. Elion stepped forward. His boots crunched against the dust. Spread out, he ordered. Secure the perimeter. As the squad fanned out across the landing zone, Elion activated the new Auspex scanner Malther had provided. The device whirred softly, then emitted a faint pulse that a long moment passed. Then numbers flickered weakly across the display. Lycos approached. What do you see? Elion stared at the readings. Interference, he said. Severe distortion. But he adjusted the device, increasing skin strength. There, faint, but unmistakable. Life signs, he said slowly. Human? Lycos asked. Elion didn't answer, because something was wrong. The scanner struggled to lock onto the signature. Its pulse irregular, flickering, as though something distorted the signal itself. And then, in a moment that made Elion's blood freeze, the Auspex emitted a single sharp ping, not from ahead, but from below. Deep beneath the facility, Atrax's voice crackled over the short-range vox. "Sergeant, you need to see this." Elion turned. Atrax stood over something half buried in the dust. Elion approached and stared. Lying on the ground was a mining drone. Its metal frame twisted, torn apart as though by immense strength. Not by tools, not by claws, but by something that had crushed it from the inside. A hollow sphere of metal imploded. Lyco's voice was quiet. What could do this? The wind howled across the barren world. Elion looked toward the silent complex, something that should not exist. And somewhere deep below their feet, the Auspex gave another faint, trembling ping. Whatever waited beneath Hadron VII was awake. The entrance to Hadron VII's mining complex loomed before the Ultramarines like the gullet of some vast, dormant beast, dark, silent, and impossibly still. The reinforced doors, built to withstand rockfall and reactor surges, stood partially open. Not forced, not blasted, simply open, as though something had passed through them without resistance, or without needing to break them at all. A thin stream of dust drifted from the gap, carried by the cold wind. The metal edges were warped inward, not bent but pulled, as though the steel had softened like wax in a furnace. Elion stared at the warping for several seconds. "Brothers," he said quietly, "proceed with caution." The squad formed up, their steps silent, their weapons raised. Blue armor glinted faintly beneath the thin daylight as they moved toward the threshold. Inside, darkness swallowed the light. Helm lamps activated one by one, casting narrow beams across the entry tunnel. Dust motes drifted through the air like drifting embers. The tunnel's walls, once marked with hazard signs and scheduling data slates, were now pitted and scarred. Elion stepped forward, Auspex in hand. The device pulsed weakly, the interference growing stronger the deeper they went. Tyron approached a wall, his gauntlet brushing gently over a scorched patch of metal. "This doesn't match lost fire," he said. "Nor plasma." "Melting," Pelion suggested. "No," Tyron replied. "More like the metal was drained of cohesion." Elion frowned. "Explain." Tyron shook his head. "I cannot." They moved deeper. The air became colder. Not the natural cold of the planet, but something sharper, like the sensation before a storm, a pressure that prickled against their armor sensors. In some places, cables hung from the ceiling like discarded nerves. In others, cogitator panels were open, their crystal displays shattered into glittering dust. "This place died fast," Lycos murmured. "Then we must discover why." Elion said. The corridor widened into an operations junction, a large circular chamber filled with control stations and hollow displays. Or rather, what remained of them. Every screen was dark, every console dead. The backup generators were offline. Emergency lighting strips flickered erratically along the walls, casting the room in intermittent blood-red pulses. Atrax bent near a collapsed console. "Sergeant, look at this." Elion joined him. A corpse lay slumped against the machine, human, but twisted. Its limbs elongated unnaturally, bones stretched until they shattered beneath the skin. The skull was deformed, as though it had imploded and expanded at once. The body's clothing, a mining crew uniform, hung in tattered strips. Lycos stepped back a pace. "What in Gilliman's name? It is not warp mutation," Elion said immediately. "I would know the signs." Tyron ran a diagnostic scan. Radiation minimal. No chemical traces. No toxins. Elion stared at the corpse. "Then what did this?" The lights flickered. Once, twice, then steadied. Atrax turned toward the deeper corridor. "Sergeant, there's movement ahead." Every Ultramarine froze. Elion raised his bolter. "Explain." My motion tracker picked something up. Briefly, something large. The silence that followed was so thick it felt like a presence of its own. Lycos narrowed his eyes. "The Auspex readings you saw earlier?" Elion nodded slowly. "The signature came from beneath us. Something deep in the lower levels. But if something moved above ground, we are not alone." Pelion said that a sharp crack echoed through the chamber. Metal striking metal. All helms snapped toward the sound. Another crack. Elion raised a hand. "Form up. Advance." The squad moved, bolters ready, into the dim hallway. Their heavy footfalls echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the oppressive silence. The corridor sloped downward, deeper into the heart of the facility. As they descended, the air grew heavier. Their armor sensors struggled to compensate, registering fluctuations in atmospheric density. Pressure variance rising, Gaius reported. Source? Elion asked. Unknown. Possibly environmental malfunction. A low hum vibrated through the floor. The squad halted. The hum grew louder, pulsing in waves. The walls trembled subtly. Dust fell like snow from overhead. The floor beneath their boots felt warm suddenly, impossibly warm, like something beneath the metal surface radiated heat. What is that? Lycos whispered. Elion checked his auspex. The device went wild. Symbols scrambled. Numbers flickered. Readings spiked at random. Then a single, heavy ping sounded, directly ahead. Contact, Elion said softly. They advanced. The corridor opened into a vast extraction bay, a cathedral-sized chamber filled with conveyor belts, mining rigs, and towering rock crushers. Once this place had been a hive of mechanical labor. Now it was silent, except for, there in the center of the chamber, something moved. Elion raised his fist. The squad froze instantly to AT first glance. Elion thought it a man. A lone figure standing beside a mining drill. But as his optics enhanced the image, details sharpened, and dread coiled in his gut, the figure was wrong. Its limbs were too long. Its posture slack, as though held upright by strings. Its skin, if skin it still was, glowed faintly with an inner light. Veins pulsed beneath it like moving shadows. Elion spoke through the squad channel. Hold position. The figure turned its head slowly. Bones cracked with each movement. Its eyes, large, glossy, reflective, focused on them with unnatural precision. Lycos stepped slightly forward. Sergeant, that thing was human once. Elion nodded once. And no longer. The creature took a step toward them. Then another. Elion raised his bolter. Halt. Identify yourself. The thing opened its mouth. A faint, crackling sound emerged. Not speech, not breath, but something like distorted vox static. Then it screamed. The sound ripped through the chamber, shaking dust loose from the ceiling. It was a sound filled with pain, terror, and something more, something alien. Something that did not belong in a mortal throat. Engage. Elion commanded. Bolters roared. Mass reactive rounds tore into the creature, blowing chunks from its torso. It staggered but did not fall. Its wound began to close, flesh knitting with horrifying speed. Emperor's Light, Tyrant cursed. Regeneration, Pelion fired a Kraken round. The explosive impact tore through the creature's chest. This time it fell, collapsing into twitching pieces. The chamber fell silent again. Then Elion's auspex emitted a new sound. Not one ping. Dozens, hundreds, all around them. Lycos swallowed. Sergeant. Elion looked up. Shapes emerged from the shadows above, clinging to ceiling beams, crouched on machinery, sliding out from between metallic structures. Dozens of twisted forms. Once human, now something else. Weapons ready. Elion roared. Helm lamps reflected on hundreds of glossy, inhuman eyes. The creatures screeched, and the chamber filled with movement as they descended upon the Ultramarines like a living tide. The first wave crashed down from the gantries with the speed and hunger of a falling avalanche. They leapt, crawled, slithered, some dropping on elongated limbs, others pulling themselves forward with spasming, unnatural motions. Their bodies glowed faintly beneath the skin, pulsing with that eerie inner light, like embers trapped beneath flesh. Elion was already moving. Form a defensive line, he bellowed. Hold the center. The Ultramarines shifted instantly, battle instincts honed by centuries of warfare locking into place. Lycos and Tyron covered the left flank, Pelion and Atrax held the right, and Gaius took the rear guard. Elion stood at the forefront, shielded only by the weight of his training and his faith. The chamber erupted into violence. Bolter fire thundered through the cavernous space, muzzle flashes strobing against the walls. Mass reactive rounds tore apart the first wave of twisted creatures, shredding limbs and rupturing bodies. Yet for every one that fell, two more surged forward over the corpses of their kin. Tyron fired a controlled burst into the chest of an oncoming monstrosity. Their movement is erratic. They do not follow battle logic. Elion slammed a kraken round through the skull of a second, its head bursting in a shower of luminous gore. They follow nothing. They're feral. No. Elion corrected sharply as he cut down another that lunged at him, its jaw distorting far beyond human limits. Not feral. Driven. Driven by what? He had no time to finish the thought point. One of the creatures lunged from the upper machinery, a blur of limbs and shrieking vox static. Elion dodged, twisting to avoid the impact as the creature scraped long, razor-like fingers across his pauldron. Sparks flew. On your flank. Lycos shouted. He fired a single, precise bolt into the attacker's spine. The creature jerked, half collapsing, then twisted onto two limbs and lurched forward again. Elion grabbed it by the throat with his free hand, lifting it effortlessly. Its jaw snapped open, emitting that horrible static scream, inches from his helm. He crushed its throat, bones snapping, then hurled the corpse into the advancing horde. Atrax was next to call out. Sergeant, they're adapting, closing distance too fast. Eliminate them before they breach the perimeter. Elion commanded, but the perimeter was already being tested. Gaius fired point-blank into a creature grappling at his leg, the bolt round punching through its torso. Another swarmed onto his back, claws scraping his rear armor plating. Elion turned and blew its head off with a single shot. Stay tight. Elion warned. If they pull us apart, they'll overwhelm us. More bodies fell. More rose to Elion's auspex chimed again. Wild, rapid, near useless. He risked a glance at the readings. The signals were multiplying. Too quickly. Impossible. Tyron. Elion shouted. Estimate their numbers. Tyron checked his visor display, even as he fired into the tide. 20, no, 30. Sergeant, there are over 100 signatures closing. Elion swore under his breath. This is a mining facility. Where in Gilliman's name did they come from? Before Elion could answer, a creature slammed into him with enough force to stagger even an Astartes. It clawed at his helm, screeching. Elion drew his combat blade and rammed it upward through the creature's sternum. The blade slid in cleanly, but the creature didn't fall. It kept clawing, even as luminous fluid poured from its wound. Enough? Elion twisted the blade and yanked it free. The creature collapsed at last. Brothers, he said, we fall back to the maintenance corridor. Lycos hesitated. We abandon the chamber? We cannot hold open ground against numbers this dense. Elion snapped. Corridor choke points will thin them. Orders given, he unleashed a final volley, forcing a brief pause in the creature's advance. Move. The squad shifted backward, firing continuously. Step by step, they retreated toward the narrow passage at the far end of the extraction bay. The creatures surged forward to close the gap, their limbs scraping against metal as they scrambled over each other to reach the Ultramarines. The corridor loomed ahead, a narrow steel throat lit by flickering red emergency strips. Lycos reached it first. Inside now, Gaius was next, then Elion, then Tyron. Atrax covered the rear, firing controlled bursts. Sergeant, on your right. Elion turned sharply. A creature clung to the ceiling beams, its body twisted, joints bent backward. It dropped toward him. Atrax fired, knocking it aside. But that shot cost him a second of movement, not a second too long that Elion's eyes widened. Atrax, a mass of creatures crashed into the lone marine, dragging him backward toward the depths of the chamber. No. Gaius roared. Atrax's bolter roared as he fired wildly into the swarm clawing over him. Go. Go. Elion surged forward, but Lycos grabbed his arm. Sergeant, you can't reach him. Atrax's voice cut through the channel, strained but resolute. Seal the corridor. Do not dishonor me. Complete the mission. Elion's fists clenched. Every instinct screamed at him to charge into the swarm. But he forced himself to stop. Atrax's sacrifice would not be wasted. He turned. Inside. Now, the remaining squad backed into the maintenance hallway as Atrax vanished beneath a wave of twisted, glowing bodies. Once the squad was through, Elion slammed the bulkhead controls. The heavy steel door screeched shut. Creatures slammed against it instantly. Claws scraped metal, bodies piled. The entire bulkhead shuddered with the force of the assault. Elion stepped back, breathing hard, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of loss. Gaius slammed a fist into the wall. Atrax, Emperor, guide him. Lycos placed a hand on Gaius' shoulder. He fights in his light now. Elion forced himself to stand tall. He could not falter now. We move deeper, he said. We regroup, resupply, and find the source of this corruption. Tyron looked down the dark corridor. The lower levels, Sergeant? Elion nodded grimly. Yes. Whatever twisted those miners, whatever consumed this facility, it lies below. Behind them, the bulkhead dented under another massive impact. The creatures were relentless and growing in number. Move, Elion ordered, and the Ultramarines pressed deeper into the dark. The corridor descended in a long, sloping curve, lit only by the flickering red strips that pulsed like an ailing heartbeat. Every few meters, sparks dripped from exposed wiring, casting brief flashes across the Ultramarines' armor. The echoes of pursuit, metal bending, claws scraping, inhuman shrieks, faded gradually behind the sealed bulkhead, but none of the warriors believed they were safe. Elion took point, bolter raised, senses sharpened. Losing Atrax weighed heavily on him, though he carried that burden in silence, as all Astartes did. But the memory lingered, Atrax being dragged down, buried beneath a tide of shrieking bodies, firing until the last moment. Such sacrifice demanded purpose, demanded answers, and answers lay below. Pelion broke the silence first, voice low. Sergeant, the corruption we saw, have you encountered its like before? No, Elion replied quietly. But I have read of things, remnants of ancient horrors, parasites of the immaterium, some that twist flesh, others that hollow the mind. He paused, tightening his grip on his bolter. But this felt directed. Directed? Lycos asked. By what? Before Elion could respond, the corridor widened into a circular junction chamber. For branching tunnels extended out like spokes, each marked with peeling hazard runes. Tyron swept his auspex over the tunnels. Left and far-right passages show environmental instability. Middle right goes deeper into the mining levels. The last one, he adjusted the device. Reads as sealed. Why sealed? Gaius asked. Unknown, Tyron answered. The system is corrupted, data loops, missing segments, fragments of vox logs overwritten by static. Static, Elion's mind returned to the screams of the creatures, how their throats had emitted distorted, synthetic sounds rather than true voices. Middle right, he decided. The enemy came from above, so whatever drives them likely lies below. They advanced. The tunnel grew darker, narrower, the red strips dimming until only a faint pulse remained. Their helms adjusted instantly, lenses enhancing the low-light environment. Still, the darkness felt heavy. Wronged at the 100-meter mark, the walls began to change. The steel plating became warped, buckled outward as if something had grown behind it and forced the metal to bend. Black organic residue clung to the seams, thin as strands of hair, but fused into the surface. Lycos crouched to inspect one cluster. This is no simple infestation. The material integrates with the plating. A biometallic fusion. Gaius stepped back instinctively. It looks like it's breathing. It was true. The strands pulsed faintly, like veins that Elion's jaw tightened. Weapons ready. We proceed. As they advanced, the tunnel opened into a cavernous sublevel, an unused excavation vault. Machinery lay abandoned in half-completed arrangements. Cranes hung motionless. Piles of or sat untouched. But the chamber was anything but silent that a faint hum, like a deep, resonant vibration, echoed through the air. It came from the far end, where a large mining rig surrounded a massive, jagged tear in the rock wall. Unlike the natural stone, the edges of the tear shimmered faintly, as though infused with an otherworldly glow. Tyron scanned it immediately. Sergeant, this anomaly is emitting low-level warp signatures. The implications were clear. A warp breach. Minor, unstable, but still lethal. So that was the source. Approach in formation. Elion ordered as they neared the tear. The hum intensified, becoming a rhythmic pulse, matching the heartbeat-like flicker of the failing lights. The air grew warm, too warm. Sweat beaded on exposed skin around the helm seals. Even the Ultramarines felt it, like they were standing before a furnace. Elion stopped abruptly. Sergeant Elion turned. Elion pointed at the ground. Footprints, bare, humanoid, and fresh, led toward the warp tear. Some prints were warped, toes elongated. Others still looked almost human. Survivors, Tyron whispered. Or what's left of them. Gaius clenched his fists. We end their suffering. Elion nodded grimly. Stay sharp. The enemy could be. A sound cut him off. A whisper. Not through the Vox. Not through the AI or die in their minds. So close. Lyco stiffened. Did you hear? Yes, Elion said. Psychic resonance. Something is projecting. Another whisper seeped into their thoughts, oily and cold. More. The air shivered. The warp tear pulsed, flaring briefly like a beating heart. Then something stepped out, not through the breach, but from behind a stack of crates near it. A figure. A man. Or what had once been a man. He wore tattered mining fatigues, but his body had elongated grotesquely. His limbs were stretched, joints twisted at wrong angles. His skin glowed faintly, veins filled with the same inner light as the creatures above. But unlike them, he still had a face twisted and raptured. That he smiled, mouth stretching impossibly wide. The song, you hear it now. It calls. It promises. Gaius raised his bolter immediately. Emperor preserve us. The miner tilted his head, eyes gleaming. I have seen the truth beneath the stone. It spoke to us. It remade us. It filled the emptiness. Elion stepped forward. Stand down. You are corrupted. End this now before you fall further. The miner laughed, an awful, gurgling laugh that bled into Vox static. You think you stand against it? You think you can stop the becoming? He reached out a hand toward the warp tear. It pulsed again, and dozens of distorted voices echoed from beyond it. More. Tyron took a step back. Sergeant, energy levels rising. Elion raised his weapon. The miner's body suddenly convulsed, twisting even further. Bones snapped. Skin stretched. His torso split open, glowing from within like molten ore. He screamed, a sound that tore across reality. And the warp tear flared like a newborn sun. Fall back. Elion shouted, but it was already too late. Something was coming through. A tremor rippled through the chamber, shaking the suspended cranes and rattling the steel beams overhead. Dust cascaded from the vaulted ceiling as the warp tear expanded, first by a meter, then two, its edges warping like molten metal caught in a storm of unseen forces. The air thickened, warping with heat and pressure. Even the Ultramarines, encased in ceramite and adamantium, felt the crushing weight that poured from the breach. The corrupted miner collapsed to his knees, his body contorting in worshipful spasms as the inner light within him flared bright enough to cast long shadows across the walls. His spine arched until it cracked loudly, but he didn't scream. Instead, he laughed, a high, broken sound woven with static and echoing whispers not entirely his own. Gaius aimed his bolter at the writhing figure. Sergeant, we put him down now. No, Elion said quietly, eyes fixed on the widening tear. He is no longer the threat. What emerged from the tear was a long, slender limb, translucent, sinewy, and impossibly flexible, slid through the breach first. It glowed with the same inner luminescence as the creatures above, but brighter, fierce, like a beacon. The limb slithered across the ground, leaving trails of scalded stone and metal. Then a second limb followed. Then another. Elion whispered. By the pre-march, the thing that pushed through the opening was not fully formed. Not yet. It flickered, as though the physical world struggled to contain it. Its body was a shifting mass of tendrils and half-shaped flesh, a being still in the process of becoming. Its face was a rippling plain of shimmering skin, and within it swirled a cluster of eyes. Human eyes, each one blinking out of sync. Voices echoed from the creature in a dozen different tones, male and female, child and elder, all overlapping. More flesh, more form, more. The corrupted miner bowed deeply before it, hands trembling. Maker, I have brought them. The strong, the perfect vessels. The creature shuddered, its shifting eyes turning toward the Ultramarines. Elion spoke with calm conviction. Brothers, target priority is the emergent entity. Fire at will. Bolters roared as one that the chamber exploded with the thunder of mass reactive rounds. Shells streaked through the air, slamming into the creature's half-formed body. Each impact detonated in bursts of gore and shimmering light, but the thing did not fall. Instead, It absorbed the violence, flesh rippling around the craters as it reshaped itself. Gaius grunted. It's adapting too quickly. It is not fully manifest, Tyron shouted above the gunfire. Its form is unstable. It should not even exist here. Then we deny its stability. Elion growled. Focus fire. Break it apart faster than it can reform. The Ultramarines tightened their formation, firing in controlled, synchronized bursts. The creature recoiled under the concentrated barrage, its limbs flaying apart, its mass shuddering violently. But the miner saw the threat to his maker and screamed, a sound infused with psychic resonance. The resonance struck the Ultramarines' helms like a shockwave, briefly scrambling their internal displays with cascading runes of corrupted data. Psychic spike. Lycos warned. Shields compensating. His words cut short as the miner charged with impossible speed, limbs stretching and contorting, fingers splaying into blade-like talons. He barreled toward Tyron, shrieking. Elion moved faster. He slammed into the mutated miner with a shoulder charge powerful enough to crack ribs. The corrupted figure flew backward, hitting the stone wall with a nauseating crunch. Before the creature could rise, Elion drew his combat blade and ran it through the miner's throat. This time, the miner screamed, truly screamed, his voice human again for a split second before the inner light consumed him. His body collapsed into ash-like fragments as the corrupted remains faded. The warp creature wailed, its shifting voices twisting into a keening fury. Vessel lost. Need more. It raised its newly formed limbs, each one splitting into multiple claws that Pelion's bolter clicked dry. I need 3 seconds to reload. You'll have one, Lycos said as he stepped forward, firing a burst that slowed the creature's advance but didn't stop it. The creature lunged. Claws whistled through the air. Elion met it head-on. He raised his bolter as a makeshift shield, allowing the creature's claws to rake across it. The weapon sparked, denting under the unnatural force, but held long enough for him to twist aside. He slashed upward with his combat blade, slicing through one of the creature's limbs. The severed flesh evaporated in a burst of shimmering energy, but the creature had many more. It struck Gaius next. The massive marine blocked with a forearm, ceramite screeching under the pressure. He roared, grabbing the limb with his other hand and wrenching it aside. You want flesh? Take mine if you can. Tyron fired into the creature's flank. Sergeant, it is splitting its form. It's trying to surround us. Indeed, the warp-born monstrosity's flesh writhed, budding new limbs and eyes. It was expanding, stabilizing, becoming. We hold the line. Elion shouted. No. Pelion said suddenly, voice tight. We fall back. Elion turned sharply. Explain. Pelion knelt, scanning the warp tier with wide eyes. A breach this size should collapse once its anchor dies. But it isn't collapsing. It's growing. The creature isn't emerging. It's trying to open the tear further. Tyron's auspex whined, a high, urgent alarm. Energy levels are escalating exponentially. Sergeant, if we remain, the breach could widen enough to bring through something far worse. The creature lashed out, its claws nearly scoring Gaius' helm. Elion made his decision instantly. We withdraw to the upper tunnels. Gaius growled. And leave this abomination to grow? No. Elion said, stepping back while firing a burst into the creature's core. We regroup, reassess, and find the means to destroy the breach completely. The creature's many voices merged into one horrific howl. Do not flee. More, come. Elion shouted over it. Fall back. The squad moved in disciplined formation, firing as they retreated. The creature surged after them, its limbs dragging twisted trails across the floor, and behind it, the warp tier pulsed like a newborn star, growing, reaching, hungry. The Ultramarines retreated up the sloping tunnel in perfect formation, though the ground shook violently beneath their boots with every pulse from the warp tear behind them. The glow from the expanding breach washed up the passage in waves, rivulets of sickly light that chased them like tendrils of fog. Elion did not look back. He did not need to. He could feel the presence that stirred behind them, a gathering storm of psychic malice and unraveling flesh. They were running out of time. Maintain spacing. Elion ordered calmly. If it manifests fully, we cannot allow ourselves to be bunched. Gaius fired down the tunnel, a controlled burst. It's gaining on us. As the bolter rounds impacted, the creature's silhouette wavered in the distance, its limbs branching like roots, each step reshaping its ever-shifting body. It did not sprint. It simply expanded, rolling forward like a tide of luminous flesh. Sergeant, Lycos said, glancing at the ceiling as dust showered down. Structural stability is degrading. Tyron checked his auspex, which flickered with static. The warp flare is destabilizing this entire section. If the tear continues to expand, it will bring the whole facility down. Pelion finished. Elion did not slow his pace. Then we use that to our advantage. The tunnel ahead narrowed further before rising into a maintenance shaft. From there, it connected back toward the central extraction levels. If they could reach the surface-level supports, they might have the means to trigger a controlled collapse, or at least isolate the sublevels. But the creature was accelerating, the voices echoing from its ever-shifting maw intensified, merging into a distorted chorus. More you, Gaius snarled. It grows bold. Tyrant shook his head. No, it grows solid. The more of our reality it consumes, the stronger it becomes. The squad pushed through the maintenance shaft, ascending the angled walkway two at a time. The walls here were still steel, unwarped, untainted, for now. Emergency lumen strips flickered as they passed, casting harsh shadows over their blue armor. They reached a vertical access ladder leading into an upper control hub. Elion gestured upward. Gaius, you first. Tyrant, after him. Move with haste. Gaius mounted the ladder and climbed rapidly, servos whirring with every motion. Pelion and Lycos covered the rear, firing occasional bursts down the dim tunnel where the warp creature advanced. Elion placed a hand on the ladder, ready to climb, when a sudden vibration passed through the steel, like something massive striking the tunnel floor. Pelion frowned. Sergeant, it's accelerating its mass again. Lycos fired another burst, buying time, but time was slipping away. Elion raised his voice. Pelion, climb. Lycos, with me. Pelion vaulted onto the ladder, climbing quickly. Lycos stayed at Elion's side. Both Marines braced to engage if the creature reached them, but a second ripple coursed through the facility. This time, the ceiling cracked. A thin fissure opened, spilling gravel and dust. The Tyrant's voice came through the vox from above. Sergeant, the tear is destabilizing the upper supports. We have minutes, maybe less. Elion climbed 3 rungs. Then the creature surged into view. It filled the tunnel. Its form had changed again, no longer a mass of formless limbs, but something vaguely bipedal. A torso towered at its center, ribs exposed and glowing from within like molten crystal. Its arms elongated into multi-jointed limbs that scraped the ceiling. Its face, if it could be called a face, swirled with dozens of human eyes, each one darting erratically. And now it spoke clearly, its many voices focused into one low, resonant tone. You will be my shape. Lycos fired a full clip into its chest. The rounds detonated, tearing chunks of luminous flesh free, but the creature regained its mass instantly. Sergeant, Lycos shouted. It's adapting faster than we can damage it. Then we don't damage it. Elion vaulted higher on the ladder. We outrun it. Lycos followed, climbing with practiced efficiency. The creature lunged, its claws smashed into the ladder, bending steel. Elion and Lycos were thrown upward by the sudden jolt, but they held fast. The creature reached again. Gaius, already at the top, leaned down, grabbing Elion by the upper arm. He hauled him the final meter into the control hub. Lycos pulled himself through a heartbeat later. The hatch slammed shut behind them. The creature's claws slammed into the metal plating instantly, denting it inward. Pelion sealed the locking clamps. That won't hold long. I know, Elion said. But long enough. They were inside a small control chamber, circular, reinforced, with an array of consoles flickering intermittently. Transparent observation ports overlooked the extraction machinery. Shaking machinery. Everything vibrated with the warp tears growing fury. Tyrants swept the consoles. I can access the structural interface. Barely. Systems are corrupted, but I can isolate the sublevels from the main struts. Meaning? Lycos asked. Meaning, Tyrant said. I can drop this entire sublevel into the depths of the moon. Gaius grinned behind his helm. A fitting tomb for the abomination. But Pelion hesitated. And Atrax's remains? Elion placed a hand on Pelion's pauldron. He died a warrior of Ultramar. His remains are already consecrated by his sacrifice. Pelion bowed his head. Yes, Sergeant. Another slam reverberated through the hatch. The metal buckled inward, warping under tremendous force. A psychic scream followed. Tearing through their minds like needles, Gaius stepped to the hatch. It comes. Tyrant, Elion said calmly. Trigger the collapse. Tyrant's hands danced across the corrupted controls. Working almost. Almost. The hatch split that a claw tore through the metal. Glowing intensely, Gaius raised his shield. Open fire. Lycos and Pelion flanked him, ready to unleash everything they had. Sergeant. Tyrant barked. Collapse is armed. 10 seconds. Then brace. Elion said. The creature forced the hatch wider, its mass pouring into the chamber like molten flesh. Its voice rattled the beams. You are mine. The squad opened fire. The creature lunged. The floor shook violently. And then everything dropped. The entire sublevel tore free from the moon's structure, plummeting into the abyss below. Steel screamed. Stone shattered. Gravity vanished. The Ultramarines fell, not toward the creature, but with the collapsing ruin. And the warped tier above them pulsed one last time, screaming like a newborn god. The world around them became a blur of falling metal, dust, and raw chaos. The collapsing sublevel of Hadron VII plummeted into the barren depths of the planet's core, tearing through tunnels and mining equipment, scattering rock and debris like stars in a dying constellation. The Ultramarines clung to handholds and each other, bolters firing to stave off the few creatures that had followed them into the control chamber. Even now, the warped monstrosities adapted, stretching and reshaping to survive, but the sheer force of the collapse tore most apart. ripping limbs, shredding sinew, and scattering the inner light into the void. Elion's jaw was tight behind his helm. He glanced around at his squad. Lycos, Pelion, Gaius, Tyrant. Each Marine fought to remain upright, to maintain cohesion despite the violent tumble downward. They were battered, but alive. Their discipline, honed across 10 millennia, was the difference between survival and death. The warp tear, severed from the stability of the sublevel, began to collapse. The luminous edges shrank and flickered violently as the disrupted mass of reality above them shrieked into itself. The voices that had tormented them, those warped amalgamations of minor, monster, and immaterium, screamed in unison, then cut off abruptly as the rupture imploded. For a brief heartbeat, silence fell over the chamber, absolute and oppressive. Elion exhaled behind his helm, muscles taut. Status check, he commanded. Gaius grunted. All limbs intact, armor holding, few minor contusions. His voice carried the weight of a soldier who had seen death and denied it. Lycos scanned the control hub with his auspex. The breach is sealed for now. No residual warp fluctuations detected. Pelion nodded slowly. And the creatures? Tyrant shook his head. Nothing remains. The collapse destroyed the main mass. Whatever survived is scattered, likely buried beneath tons of metal and rock. They won't emerge for a long time, if ever. Elion allowed himself a small, rare moment of relief. Yet he knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The Imperium had taught him that the unknown rarely died so easily that he looked out through the reinforced observation port. The upper levels of the mining facility were scarred and twisted. Sparks jumped from crushed machinery. Dust choked the air. But the core threat, the warp-touched monstrosity and the terror it had grown from, was gone. Brothers, he said, voice steady. This battle is over. But Hadron VII remains a warning. Unknown forces lurk in the void, preying on the unwary. The Emperor protects, but vigilance is eternal. Pelion's voice was quiet. Sergeant Atrax. Elion's eyes lingered on the upper shadows of the crumpled facility. He fought as an Ultramarine. His sacrifice bought us this moment. He will be honored among the chapter. Let that be enough. Lycos placed a hand on Elion's shoulder. We are alive. That is the Emperor's will. Elion nodded, his gaze sweeping the ruined complex one last time. The silence outside the hatch was heavy, the hum of emergency systems the only reminder of life within the station. They were battered, but unbroken. And as Ultramarines, that was all that mattered. Prepare the drop pods, Elion ordered. We return to the surface. We report, and the chapter will decide the fate of this system. For now, we leave the Hadron Belt behind, sealed and cleansed of the enemy's touch. The squad moved with precise efficiency, checking weapons, securing equipment, and ensuring the wounded were stabilized. The Thunderhawk was called to pick them up, engines rumbling in anticipation. The glow of warp remnants faded behind them, leaving only scarred metal and dust as they lifted off Hadron VII. Elion allowed himself a moment to breathe, truly breathe. Macridge was distant, but he could already feel the pull of duty drawing them homeward. The Imperium had survived another unknown threat. Ultramar had endured, and the Ultramarines, ever vigilant, would continue to stand between the darkness and humanity, unyielding, unbroken, eternal. The Hadron Belt disappeared beneath them, a scar on the edge of the segmentum, its secrets buried beneath tons of rock and ceramite. The universe beyond remained unchanged, but the echoes of what they had faced lingered in the minds of the warriors, a reminder that the galaxy was vast, dark, and alive with horrors yet unseen. Elion looked at his brothers, each resolute and silent. He knew this was just one of countless battles to come. But for now, they had survived. For now, they had upheld the Emperor's will. And as the Thunderhawk soared into the void, leaving Hadron VII behind, the Ultramarines' oath remained unbroken. They shall never falter. They shall never fail. The galaxy was dangerous, but the sons of Guilliman stood eternal. The war continued, but so would they. The end.